Hi, everybody. Welcome to our event on Pakistan's education ecosystem. I am Anam Khan, and I am the co-founder of the NewsRun. It's a daily email newsletter that provides smart, digestible, simple breakdowns of Pakistan's top news. And we are on a mission to empower Pakistani communities around the world through access to high quality, balanced, and digestible information. And Momal, do you want to take it from here?
Yes. So the NewsRun, one thing that we've just done is post in the link. So if you don't know about us, definitely go and check us out. But hi, everyone. Good to meet you. I'm Mumal. I am Anam's co-founder for the NewsRun. We are very passionate about finding ways to disperse Pakistani news to the entire Pakistani community across the world. And we're especially thrilled today that we have this event that we're going to be talking about, a very important event that's close to so many different people's hearts, which is Pakistan's education ecosystem. So to start off, for those of you who are joining us virtually, and for those of you who are joining us in person at one of our in-person watch parties, thank you so much for making the time. We're so thrilled you're here to be part of this important discussion. Before we kick off, we want to start off with just a few different housekeeping items. But before that, let's just jump into what this event is. So this particular event, focusing in on thought leadership and just understanding and discussing these important initiatives, this particular event is brought to you by the NewsRun, and it is in collaboration with Pakistan Literacy Fund. For those of you who don't know, Pakistan Literacy Fund is a US-based nonprofit organization, and they work really hard to provide a quality, marketable education to the children of Pakistan. Now, Pakistan Literacy Fund is the US-based partner of CARE Foundation Pakistan. And they have a very strong mission to make sure that they empower students of Pakistan to compete at a global level and to become productive members of society. So to give you a few additional housekeeping items, the Zoom is probably going to last a little over an hour. We're going to introduce the topic in just a moment, and then we will dive into a keynote address with Ms. Seema Aziz. She is the founder and chairperson of CARE Foundation Pakistan. CARE Foundation is an NGO that has over 900 different schools in Pakistan. Over 200,000 students have been enrolled. And it's a really amazing initiative, and we're really proud and honored to have her join us today. After the keynote address, we have a fantastic panel. And the panel will include Amna Ali Bhatti, who is a teacher with 10 years of experience, Anam Sadiq, who is the co-founder of an education technology startup based out of Pakistan, finding ways to include technology in everyone's day-to-day education. And we have a student as well who's going to be sharing his insights and his perspectives from a student perspective. He is currently an A2 level student at Nixer College and in Karachi. And the fourth panelist, of course, will be Ms. Seema, who's going to provide the perspective of an education advocate and activist. So with that, you can expect that there will be 3 to 5 questions in the panel discussion. If you have any questions or comments that you would like to add, you should be able to do so by just clicking on the question button on the Zoom menu bar at the bottom of the screen. I think everyone has a slightly different setup. So feel free to send through any questions. We'll do our best to try and take questions from our audience as well. And after the event, we'll have a quick survey that you can fill out as well. So this is very exciting. Thank you again for attending. And let's go ahead and jump right in. We are going to start with the panel discussion, which will be with Ms. Seema Aziz, who is, again, the founder and chairperson at CARE Foundation. So Anam is going to take over now, and we should see Ms. Seema on the screen any minute now. Very classic Zoom thing, so things may take a little bit longer, but we should have her up here in a moment.
Ms. Seema, Ms. Seema, can you turn your video on? Hi, and you mute. Welcome, Ms. Seema. Mumil gave a fantastic introduction, and now I just want to dive in and ask you some more questions about CARE Foundation and the phenomenal work you've been doing. So why did you start CARE?
Why did I start CARE? That's a great question. So first, thank you for having me. And I want to thank the NewsRun team and the Pakistan literacy team for providing me with this opportunity to talk about something which is so close to my heart, which is the education in Pakistan. So CARE came into being as a direct result of the flood of 1988, a terrible flood which devastated thousands of villages in my region. Hundreds of thousands of people lost their homes and all their worldly belongings. And working in that area, we arrived to help, of course, with food and medicine. And then working in that area, helping people rebuild their homes. We were struck with a realization, we'd spent months helping people rebuild their homes. And as I went back every day to help them rebuild, there were hundreds of children running around the area doing nothing, barefoot, matted hair, runny noses. Anyway, halfway through, while through building the homes, we got struck with the realization that a flood could come again next year and could take their homes away again. And we thought, what would they look for somebody like us to come and help them rebuild again? Why do they need their help? Why our help? Why can't they rebuild their homes themselves? And we understood then that it was all about in education. The difference between them and us was in education. And education, we realized, is the greatest gift, a gift that no flood can take away, that becomes a part of a person and empowers people. The true empowerment of people helps them stand on their own feet, take charge of their destiny. And we realized by then that there were no schools in the area, and that's why the hundreds of children were running around everywhere. So we decided to build a school, and that's how CARE started.
And what sets CARE schools apart?
Well, so first we built that one school. Somebody donated a piece of land. We put together a building, and with everyone saying, the poor don't want to study. You've gone mad. Why are you building a school? But anyway, having worked for so long with the people of the area, helping them rebuild homes, we'd realized, one, that everyone loves their children dearly as much as we do, and everyone wants a better life for their children. And so we knew that the school was critical. As that school opened its doors on the 17th of January, 1991, 250 children had lined up outside, all barefoot, runny noses, matted hair, tops, no trousers, trousers, no tops, but everyone had lined up for a chance to a better life. And while we were putting together the curriculum for the school, my son had joined one of the best private schools in the country that same year. And as I compared his curriculum with the curriculum of the government schools, I realized there was a big difference in quality. And I knew then that the children of my school must study the same curriculum that my son was studying, and that the children in the best private schools were studying, because that is one, of course, CARE's core philosophies and what we believe in and what we work with, which is core to us, is that there has to be an equality of opportunity. It's really all equal, and somewhere there has to be an even playing field for every child, and that we believe has to be in school, an equality of opportunity, an equal education which helps everyone reach their full potential. And that, I think, is what may be one of the main things which sets CARE schools apart from others, with an absolute belief that education is the right of every child and the duty of state to provide it, and together with state, the duty of citizens like ourselves, of all of civil society, to ensure that our children, the future of our nation, are equipped with the education that is their right, and the education which will help them become more productive members of society and lead fuller lives and reach their full potential. And so with that curriculum in place, we started that first school in January 1991. And by the end of the year, the children had totally turned around. next, and word got around, there's a school where education happens. Next year, we had 450 children. The year after that, we had 850 children. Children were walking hours and miles to that first care school. And soon we were scrambling to build more rooms. And by the next year after that, we had over 1,000 children. We started a double shift. And we realized that how keen people were to educate their children. You know, it was a myth that the poor don't want to educate the children. So the school also was, not only were we teaching the curriculum, which the best schools were teaching, it was also co-education, which was an absolute necessity, because I'd realized that, you know, it's even more difficult. It was very difficult to find teachers, any sort of teachers in the area. But if we separated our girls and boys, there'd be no way that we could teach our girls maths and science and English or anything, or any education at all. And so care schools are co-education, all care schools, and also they provide the best quality of curriculum that is available in the country.
So I'm really curious to know, I'm sure you have several stories about your students that you love, but what is one of your favorite student success stories?
From so many, yes, there are absolutely thousands of school students that we're very proud of, because starting from that one care school and 250 children, today care is running over 900 schools across Pakistan, and we have today an enrollment of over 300,000 children. And over the years, more than 150,000 children have graduated, taken their metric exam from a care school. So you're right, we have many stories of children that we are very proud of. But I guess I'll start maybe with one of our earliest graduates. The first care graduate to then go on to King Edward Medical College and graduate from there in 2003. So it was, it's an amazing story. He was part of our second or third graduating class. He graduated care school in '97 and went on to college. At that time, we couldn't support them through college. By '98, '99, I'd realized that we had so many bright and wonderful students graduating care with really good marks, and we realized that they may not be able to get into college because of financial restrictions. So we started a scholarship fund to support as many of our children as we can, as we could, through college and university. So one day in the year 2000, I got a call from, this is Muhammad Azam. He was our first graduate from King Edward Medical College later. So he called me and said, you know, he was a very bright student. So, and absolutely there were, I remembered, I guess I knew nearly all the graduating students at that time. The numbers weren't that large. But he called and said, you know, after graduating from care, I did my FSc, and then I got admission into King Edward Medical College. And I did year 1 and 2. I'm now going into year 3 of medical school. The first 2 years, I worked in a factory through the night, and I used to work in a chemist shop in the evening to earn enough money to put me through college. But he said in year 3, I won't be able to do that because it's the work is very hard, and you know it's nearly a 24-hour system. So I won't be able to. I hear you've started a scholarship fund. Can I apply for it? And so of course I said, absolutely, Azam. You're absolutely, you know, you can apply for it right away and come right away. So he said immediately at that time, I need 10,400 rupees for the whole year. And I was, you know, I thought in my heart, and I said, Azam, that's not enough. But anyway, he arrived in the office. I tried to convince him to take more money because, you know, we thought he'd need money for books and clothes and stuff like that. He was adamant. I sent him to the scholarship officer. Anyway, after a while, the scholarship officer called and told me, Azam's gone. We've given him the scholarship. How much money did you give him? 10,400. Oh my gosh, he said he wanted no more. But anyway, so that's just to say how it was amazing and very moving that he calculated exactly what he wanted and didn't want any more from us. But of course, we put him through the next 2 years of college. He graduated with honors and then went on to become a registrar, which is also very prestigious, and then went on to become a heart specialist. He was a heart specialist in one of the best heart hospitals in Lahore, in Pakistan. So we're very proud of him. And one of his main things was that I always want to stay here in my country, serve my people. He said, I was the first doctor from my whole area. And ever since I was in third year of med school, he says, all the people of the village come to me with their problems. And so that's what he's doing, but he's gone on. We're very proud of where he is now and what he's managed to achieve. But we have many, many others like that who've gone on to do wonderful things.
I feel like a lot of the audience here is going to remember that very special story. And I think it's very unique for CARE to actually help its graduates move on to college and university, because they have CARE is helping them build their future even after they graduate. And I think that's so important. So what are 2 things that CARE is focused on for the year 2020?
So one, we believe there are children, honestly, absolutely, absolutely precious in ours. And we do 1,000 scholarships every year for college and university. And we believe that's essential because the children are so bright and so amazing. A lot of them do extremely well, but they would never be able to afford to go to college. And we really feel that the children are ours, and that's the least we can do for them. And anyway, so for the year 2020 and onwards, we would just like to actually, 3 or 4 years ago, we set ourselves a target of having a million children enrolled at one time. We felt that if we could get to a number that large, we might actually have an impact on the narrative of education in Pakistan, or be able to change it in some way. Because really, it's a game of numbers everywhere, but in Pakistan too, it's a game of numbers, and one needs to get to very large numbers of children to be actually able to make a difference in that whole ecosystem. And that's what we still want to do. That's our goal now and at all times, to reach as many children as we can, to provide this better quality of education to as many children of Pakistan as we can. Because as we all know, and as we believe in CARE, education is a great equalizer, but only an equal education can equalize. And so it's critical to be able to provide this good quality of education to all our children. That's how the one thing that sets CARE apart when you asked is, we started the whole concept of public-private partnership in Pakistan by adopting 10 government schools way back in 1998. And we've been able to get to these very large numbers of children because of that partnership with government. Today, we run more than 800 government schools. We adopt them, take over, improve them, and we've managed to turn around every school we walked into. And starting from some of the buildings being nearly empty, today we run more than 100 schools in Lahore alone in a full double shift. Our largest boys' school in Lahore has 4,000 boys, and our largest girls' school has the same number of children. So our target moving on again is to just reach larger numbers of children. And we hope that together with all of us, with support from people in Pakistan and all over the world, we hope that together we'll be able to reach many, many more children. And maybe actually our goal is to be somehow able to reach every child. And that's how we agreed to adopt the government schools, because from the beginning, our dream was to reach every child. And early on, we realized that no private organization can ever do education for all. Only a government can do education for all. So when the government invited us in 1998 to adopt some of their schools, simply they said, you know, your schools do so well and ours don't. We're requesting you to adopt some of our schools. So we adopted them with this desire to be able to reach every child, or to reach as large a number of children as we possibly could. And it turned out to be, I believe that this public-private art partnership that we started all those years ago is the way forward. It helps us to not put money into bricks and mortar. We don't need to build all the schools. They already exist, they're just empty. And so our money goes direct into education and helps us give a much better quality of education. Put money into computers and STEM programs and other things which are cutting edge technology, because our desire and our belief is that children, if you educate children, it should be as good as any education anywhere. And so that helps us put all our money into providing them with the best quality of education.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for taking us through the process of how CARE expanded. And it was wonderful learning more about your goals for the upcoming years. And this is the perfect segue into our panel now, where we're going to be hearing from our three other speakers, while Ms. Seema will also stay on as a panelist. And we've already introduced Ms. Seema, and we're also going to be hearing from Anam Sadiq, who's the co-founder and Chief Education Officer at EdCasa, Amna Ali Bhatti, who is a psychology instructor at Cedar College and Credo College, and Khubaib Khan, who is an A-level student at Nixer College. And so now we are going to kick off the panel, and Mumal,
thank you so much.
You can ask the first question.
Yeah, absolutely. Firstly, to start, Ms. Seema, thank you so much for taking the time to walk us through that. It's amazing the kind of work CARE Foundation is doing. And one of my favorite things that you mentioned was providing an even playing field for all students in Pakistan. It addresses the class system that we have, which is honestly helping nobody at the end of the day. If we all can't rise together, then some of us rising is just not enough. So thank you so much for walking us through that. And we've been posting a few notes. We have so many comments coming in with suggestions and recommendations, offers to help. Please continue sending those in, and as well as your questions. We will find time to bring that all together at the end of this panel. So what we'd like to do right now is share a few visuals, and then we can go ahead and get started. So we've brought all of our panelists back on, and all right, great. So as part of the NewsRun Pakistan education ecosystem, we'd like to start with a quote. And one of the things we always focus on at the NewsRun is having quotes motivate and inspire us to do the work that we want to do. So this is a quote by Charles Kettering, and it goes, "A problem well stated is a problem half solved." There's often a hesitancy in Pakistan to talk about the real problems we're having. And it's really important for us to address those problems, not be afraid of them, which is why we wanted to have this panel discussion today. And while it will remain respectful, it will absolutely remain honest as well, where we want to talk about the things that are very challenging for us. What's also important here is not just to focus on those. So we focus in on the solutions, which is why we wanted to start the panel discussion, or this entire event for that matter, with Ms. Seema Aziz talking about the work they're doing to address those problems. So for those of you who have joined us today, thank you so much. And what we will be starting off with addressing what the problem is, and then we would absolutely be ending on a much more hopeful note. So don't lose hope along the way if it starts to feel like everything is just not working as it should. Let's start with a few stats. This is no surprise. The literacy rate in Pakistan is less than 60%. And if we are also being honest about what that literacy means, there's a lot left to be desired. What's a very heartbreaking stat is that there are over 22.8 million children currently outside of school. So all of these children don't have that sense of belonging that they need. 54% of elementary schools, from just a structural standpoint, don't have electricity. 67% have drinking water, and 68% have latrines. So you know that these are very challenging statistics, and actually more so than the stat itself, these are the challenges all of us can come together to solve. Let's go ahead and jump into the panel discussion. We are so excited to have this very esteemed group of panelists here. I want to make sure everyone is on, which they are. This is perfect. So As Anam has already introduced the speakers, I'm going to give it one more quick round. Ms. Seema Aziz is who you just heard from. She is the chairperson and founder of CARE Foundation. Anam Sadiq is the co-founder of an education technology startup called EdCasa. Amna Ali Bhatti is a psychology instructor with 10 years of teaching experience, over 10 years of teaching experience at Cedar College and Credo College. And she has had a lot of hands-on experience of being in the system itself and dealing with students. Speaking of being hands-on and in the system, we are so excited to also have a student join us from Nixer College, Khubaib Khan, and he will be sharing the perspective, of course, from a student perspective. So before we jump into the questions, we want to set the stage a little bit. And what this essentially means is we'd like to start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. This is really just a psychology theory on human motivation. So to set the stage and essentially just level set across our audience space, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes just explaining what exactly this is, and then we'll jump into the first question. So the way this hierarchy works is it essentially goes from bottom up. So you have your physiological right at the bottom, which is food and clothing. You have safety. So here you can think about safety like job security, safety of a home, some shelter. When you jump to the third one, which is belonging, love and belonging, this is belonging to something. We are all meant to belong to a family, to a sports team, to a friend group, something that makes us feel like we have something to go back to. The fourth one is esteem, which has more to do with recognition and accomplishment, reputation, status in society. If students feel like they can get that recognition, they have an opportunity, they're likely to go after it more. Now, these are called your deficiency needs. And the way these essentially work is that your motivation goes down as these needs are met. What that means, as an example, is if you are very hungry and you are given food, then that need is met and you no longer will be as motivated for food. So the goal really is to meet all of those four needs so you can get to the last need, which is self-actualization. Self-actualization is what we refer to, or what Maslow referred to as growth need. This is really that point when the more you engage it, the more someone wants it. And this has to do with just feeling like you have that purpose. So essentially what this is that you can be the best version of yourself. If you've learned X, now you can learn Y, and you continue to grow as a human being. This is, of course, a theory that has evolved over time. But we want to start off with this to better understand Pakistan's education ecosystem. So we'll go ahead and kick it off with the first question. And that is essentially hoping that each one of our panelists from their own perspectives can share one way that, or however you would like to phrase it, how those first four needs can be met so that your students in Pakistan can actually get to the self-actualization. So over here, we'd like to start with Anam from EdCasa. If you would like to share your opinion, then we'll go around to the rest.
Thank you guys for having me here. It's very exciting to be in this diverse group of panelists. This is a very, very tough and broad question, right? I mean, it addresses safety. We know the issues that are around safety, especially when it comes to girls in education. What I can say, being in EdTech and leading EdCasa, is that one of the stats that's really important as well when we're setting context is that, you know, the number of students that aren't going to school, that sort of gives us sleepless nights. But those students who are going to school, if you look at the learning outcomes, and especially where we intersect at EdCasa, which is high school, we are trying to build a product for the masses, you know, addressing the needs of students of 9 to 12 for metric and intermediate, which is a huge space on its own. What we see is that about 40% plus students who are appearing for their standardized board exams that are run by the government aren't doing very well. About 40% of them are actually failing. And the cutoff threshold is actually just 33%, not even 50%. So that sort of like gives me panic attacks as an educator that this is not right. You know, we're competing now in a skill-based economy with the rest of the world. So that's where we need to intervene. So one of the first things we did was we asked students, we went to about 800 households and asked them, what's the problem? Why are they not able to, you know, get this 33% marks cutoff? And what we found was that it actually relates back to this pyramid really well. The students aren't feeling like they belong in a classroom. That's what we found out. You know, when they describe how their relationship with an educator is and how strained they feel in that. That's sort of what we at EdCasa then started working towards, that this is what we need to unlock. Education is a relationship, and the teacher needs to be relatable to the students, needs to be approachable to the student for the student to actually start learning and start sort of, just absorbing what the teacher is saying to them. So that's a really important part of this learning triangle and the pyramid. And so for me, a very small part of what I think can be addressed from my experience is that we need teachers to be trained into developing a relationship with a student and be humanized. I've taught at Karachi Grammar School right off. When I graduated, I taught A levels, and one of the things that was said to me was that, you're young, so teacher, just be intimidating so that students keep that distance from you, and you can sort of have classroom management, and those are the techniques that are sort of handed down to you. But what I found was that it's good to be humanized, like just talk through with the students what your journey has been, why you're teaching what you're teaching, and relate the subject matter to the student for them to really absorb and learn. So as far as I'm concerned, I think love and belonging is can be easily transitioned on, and the student and the teacher presence both can intersect really well for that learning environment to be created and for students to overcome the challenges that they face in schools and lower learning outcome levels.
Thank you so much for that, Anam. And that kind of touches so much on what Ms. Seema had already mentioned that CARE Foundation is doing. So it's good to know that we're all kind of on the same page. Actually, Amna, we'd love to go to you as the educator as well. Tell us more about what you think of this question and how you would address it.
Hello, thank you for having me on board. I actually just, I would echo Anam Sadiq's words that teacher training is going to play such an important role in helping us achieve these earlier core motivations, deficiency needs. I would split actually the first 4 levels, I would split it further into 2 and 2. And although the top 2, love and belonging and esteem needs, I think this is something that both public and private teachers can achieve, can deliver to the students through training. If teachers, we simply do not invest enough in our teacher training, we simply don't give them the kind of empathy training, the kind of understanding that they need to develop a relationship, a bond with the students, and that this relationship is the key to achieving the targets together with students, whether they're educational targets or their personal goals or however they want to visualize their life. So we simply don't train teachers enough, neither on a public level and nor on private scale. So we must invest in teacher training, not just in terms of the technical skills, but also in terms of empathy, in terms of understanding how student psychology works, in terms of understanding how respectfulness and ownership of the whole teaching student-teacher relationship has to be taken by the teacher, and how they can help by taking ownership, they can actually put the process forward. For the bottom 2 needs, the physiological and safety needs, I would say there's actually a very visible split over here. The kind of schools that I teach at, high-end public schools, my students typically have all the comfort that they can actually hope to have in terms of their physiological and safety needs. They do not need to care about where the next meal is coming from. They do not need to care about where they're going to be sleeping at night and so on and so forth. Their needs are met by virtue of their birth. And therefore, they really do not, there's a big split in terms of public and private candidates coming to schools, right? So some of the students that I deal with, most of the students that I deal with, they don't have to worry about this. But I'm also, just like CARE Foundation, I'm also associated with a very large not-for-profit organization in Pakistan, with over 1,700 schools spread out across Pakistan. And I was there in the morning, and we were talking about the same issue, that some of our students cannot come to school in the morning because they have to work in the morning, or they can't come to school in the afternoon because they have to work in the morning and then go to school very, very tired with their work, or they work in the afternoon or in the evening, they simply don't have the time to get on with their homework or the kind of work that they need to do to achieve excellence in their education. So they are so entrenched in the need for ensuring their physical well-being. They have to think about where their meals are coming from every single day. So they simply don't have the luxury to invest in education. They are enrolled in schools, they want to do well, but they simply don't have the space to do well. So I think this is where organizations like CARE Foundation and other NGOs that are working for the same objective here in Pakistan, either they need to step up, or ideally, as Ms. Seema said, I would say that this is not a job for NGOs. This is what the public sector needs to do. This is what the government really needs to do to make sure that students' physical and safety needs are met, that they are in a secure environment, that they don't have to worry about where their next meals are coming from, so that they can actually focus on growth rather than just meeting their everyday needs. So there's I think there's a split, if I've made that clear for you.
That's awesome. And I should also mention that Amna also comes with a background in psychology, so this makes more sense as well. But it's so true. That is absolutely something. Can you really expect a student to care about math if they haven't had anything to eat and they don't know if they'll have something to eat? And we'd like to actually hear more about the student-teacher relationship, but now more so from the student perspective. So Hubeb, if you would like to go next.
All right. Yeah. So thank you for having me here. First of all, it's a very diverse group over here. I feel like we can really touch upon a lot of things. So when Miss Anam was talking about KGS, her time at KGS, and how the administration had told her to actually, be intimidating as a teacher, I feel like it made me realize something like that I'm in Nixer College, right? So we have like this TA system where teachers have assistants, and those assistants are basically students who help out the other students who might not be as good at the subject. So myself, I'm a biology TA, right? So when we're talking about teacher training, I feel like in Pakistan, students and teachers don't really have like a relationship that they should. I feel like since teachers are being told to be intimidating to students, I feel like the student is always their true potential is like kind of overshadowed. So as like I'm a TA, right? So if there's a student that comes to me, I feel like we really connect, and that really helps me get through to them. So, and if you think about it, that student is, he's being taught by the same teachers, and he didn't understand at that time. But when he came to me being a student, he spoke to me and I taught him the same thing and he understood it. So that it really goes to show that as a student, teaching a student, there's like this bond, there's like this connection, there's like this mental connection, because as a student I really understand where the other person is coming from. So you really if you think about it, it makes sense that a teacher should be trained in that department in such a way that she understands or he understands how the student is how the student's mind is operating and stuff like that. Other than that, if I want to talk about the last two sections of this pyramid here, the safety and physiological needs, as the theory suggests. So I feel like in Pakistan, if you're in a private school, you're most likely going to have this environment where all of these needs are already being met, right? You're coming from a good family, you can afford everything. But if you talk about someone who, for say, is in a madrasa, right? So we have madrasas here who are also offering matric and inter, and we also have public schools which are being run by the government. So when we're talking about those, I want to talk about the environmental factors, basically. So when you go to an environment, like if you take a private school like Nixer College or Scepter, and you take a public school, a government college, and you basically just enter the school, and it's visible to you the massive environmental difference. Like I've been to government schools myself to visit, like on a field trip and like teach there. So when you go, it's kind of a depressing environment, really. Your walls are not painted, there's no ventilation like the fans, there's no ACs of any sort, there's not even tables and chairs in some schools. So I feel like a student won't be motivated to actually go and study in a school where it's basically the same environment that they have at home. So if you consider that, I feel like the environmental factor really matters, like to actually motivate someone to go to school. I feel like the school needs to, you must have a sense of belonging, like you have a family there, you have students, you have a good environment to study in. So I feel like they all go hand in hand. So that's all I'm going to say.
No, that's great. So what I gathered there is just having that level of empathy as well. So the empathy of knowing how another student would feel in your position, or even the empathy of seeing that you come from a place of privilege, but not everybody does. And I think that's a great way to end this particular question with Ms. Seema, if you would like to share your thoughts on the needs that need to be met and how they can be met, the first 4 needs that could be met for students so they can truly feel that self-actualization.
So really, so thank you. It's the needs are different. You know, I've heard everyone, all that is absolutely correct. But then, you know, it's really at the end of the day, the teachers. It's the attitude of the teachers and the attitude of the school, the whole administration towards the children. People really want to be cared for or understand that they're important. They shouldn't be screamed at, or there should be no corporal punishment. But you know, just to share, we have a school under a tree or on a data we adopted with maybe 20 children. We today have 600 children in that school. Nobody drops out. We have other schools with 2 rooms, like you're saying, we make sure there are toilets and lights and fans, but the vast majority of government schools when we walked in had no toilets, no lights, no fans, no chairs, children were sitting on the floor in their neat little uniforms, waiting for an education to happen, which was not going to happen. Of course, we provided the fans and the lights and whatever all else, but the most important I found is the connection to the teacher. The attitude, it's the human factor, it's the empathy, like you rightly said, Hubeb, also they could learn from you because you were empathetic. And so, you know, it's just the experience, and I've only learned from the experience of years working with so many schools and students all over the country, and realized, you know, when our school under the trees rose from 40 children to 600 and nobody dropped out, and we tried to rent a small house next door so we could house them somewhere and we couldn't find it. You know, more and more I have understood that it's about human empathy. It's about how much you are respected. And also I found the quality of education that you are being given. We have very remote schools with very high number of girls, you know, and everyone says where girls walk hours and miles to those schools, and our dropout is extremely low. It's really non-existent. And we've realized, and we thought, you know, why do some schools stand empty next to ours, and ours are so full? And we understood that it's really it's just because we provide the best quality of education with love and respect. And that's what matters to everyone, that you should be respected, and that the quality, it surprises me how illiterate parents understand that the quality of education that some schools are providing is better than others. And they drop out of schools where the quality is not good. And how do they understand that the quality of education in some schools is really good? And that's, I think, what keeps children in school. Every child and every parent can understand whether the education they're getting is of value or not, is creating a value or not. That's what I think. And so it's most important is the empathy, the attitude of teachers to the student, and also the quality of what they are giving them. Yeah.
Thank you so much. That is so true. Before we move to the next question, I just want to reiterate the importance of empathy, whether that is Anam's experience at KGS, instead of being a strict, unrelatable, kind of intimidating teacher relating to them, or Amna's experience of building that student-teacher relationship where you're a cheerleader along with an educator, Hubeb being a TA for biology, being himself a pre-med student, how all of that kind of really rolls into what Ms. Seema closed with. It's empathy. Know where you come from and know how someone else would feel. These are material things at the end of the day, but human beings generally tend to feel the same. So we'll move on to the next question, which doesn't require a screen share. Before that, I will just mention we're seeing a lot of raised hands coming in as well. Please feel free from the audience to continue putting your questions and any comments you'd like in the chat or in the questions box. But Anam, I'll turn it to you for question 2.
Yeah, so question 1 about human needs. This is a good segue into a conversation about educational setting. And I think we should start with the student in this group. There is a common viewpoint that Pakistan does not have a good quality education. And while there are many factors that might go into this, what would you describe as high quality learning in an educational setting for students in Pakistan?
All right. So the thing about high quality learning in Pakistan, I think first we should consider that there's different types of education systems. There's different types of schools in Pakistan, right? So firstly, you have your public schools, which are government run. You have your private schools, which are obviously under private administration. So going from there, I think there's a very big difference in the opportunities provided to the students, right? So I mentioned earlier that a private school would have a better environment. They have better trained teachers, and in a public school, you wouldn't expect that from a public school because firstly, they're just not as well funded, right? So, and I feel like if we talk about public schools, they don't get the same opportunities, right? Public school students, they're not being sent to field trips, right? I feel like field trips are huge motivators. They don't have ECAs, they don't have inter-school, I don't know, soccer competitions. There's no sports over there. So I feel like all of that, it kind of ties in to it basically, it's all about the opportunities, right? So I feel like if you increase like ECAs and stuff like that at public schools, they would actually, they would come out as better students. They would have that required skill set. They would be more proficient at whatever they're doing, because academics are in their own place, where I feel like extracurriculars are equally as important. So they should be treated as such. So high quality learning, yeah, I feel like ECAs and sport teams and, counselors for your universities, stuff like that, it all has to be there.
Yeah, that's interesting how you've incorporated like learning outside of a classroom as well, and how like in an educational setting, like learning should also encompass other factors like creativity or activities. So that's a very good point, Khubaib. Thank you for sharing. And Ms. Seema, I'd like to move on to you next. So what are your thoughts on this?
On
high quality learning in an educational setting, like how would you describe that, considering you have private care schools and also government schools that CARE has adopted?
Yeah, we try to put in the same system, the same curriculum, the same attitude. The core values is what we take with us wherever we go. And yes, Khubaib's absolutely right, and I think goes without saying, but there is a fair amount of activity happening in government schools too, at least in CARE adopted government schools, which is quite a large number. We put our children into every competition. They are part of the model UN of every which college and university in the country. We've come away with best delegate awards from LUMS Model UN and IBA Karachi and GIK and stuff like that. But you're right, it is rarer and it makes a lot of difference. But again, I'm going to say it is the basic concept of how do you look at a child? What do you think a school is? Is it there for jobs? Is it there for, are you counting the money spent in there? Or is a school created to provide a really good quality? Are the students the focus of the school? Is it student-centered? And that's what we believe in CARE. And I don't know, he's absolutely right. It has to be student-centered. The conversation in the CARE schools I go around and say, I just want to hear children voices, not teacher voices. In Pakistan, the sad thing is that a lot of schools have a rote learning system. Nobody wants to hear the child's thoughts. Nobody wants to know what the children are thinking. And that really retards imagination and doesn't let people grow to where they would grow. So I think the important thing is how interactive are you? How much importance is, how student-centered is the school? And student-centered means how important are the thoughts of the student? Are they allowed to express opinions and come up with questions? Are they allowed to ask questions? Are they allowed to express opinions? So all that, it's a thought process. And of course, the extracurricular is critically important. But a lot of school, it's again the attitude with which you do the extracurricular. And I guess it's just the encouragement, the respect of the student is very important, and an understanding that the welfare of the student is actually supreme. That's what we're all there for in schools, right? So that students can grow and to their full potential. So,
no, I really appreciate that you, as a social activist, and Hubaib, who is a student, that your thought process is quite similar in this respect. And Anam, I think it would be interesting to hear like what you would describe as a higher quality learning experience in an educational setting, because you are also approaching this subject from a technology and ed tech perspective.
Absolutely. So at CASA, our focus is high school students and helping the students. The student success is sort of the number one motivator and the number one, impact lens for us. So the way I sort of look at learning and what for me defines quality learning, the framework is like sort of in 3 tiers for me. So first thing is, your written curriculum, what your learning objectives are, that you're going to be actually then converting into taught curriculum, what you're teaching from that entire set of objectives that you have as an educator. And then the third thing is what you're testing the student at. So if you look at sort of competing curriculums, if you look at OA levels, you look at IB system, you look at what the government is doing, what you'll see is that the written curriculum, where the learning objectives, as far as the learning objectives are concerned, are actually very similar. So we've done this huge exercise at CASA where we mapped all the curriculums of 22 different boards in Pakistan, and then what OA levels is doing and different competing ones are doing. The difference really lies in the taught curriculum and then furthermore in the tested curriculum. So the taught curriculum again is what books are you using? How is that information being provided? And that's where I see as an educator a gap. But the biggest gap actually comes in the tested curriculum, right? What are you testing students for? So again, in a public setting, what students are being tested most often for is recall, which is sort of the easiest in your learning pyramid, right? If you look at what you're doing as an educator, what you want, the skills you want the student to have by the time they graduate from their education and are able to contribute meaningfully to a society, again alluding to Maslow's pyramid of self-actualization and creation comes at the top. What comes right at the bottom is recall and remembrance. And if you look at the papers, that the past papers that sort of historically have been going on, a lot of emphasis is on recall, and then comes your understanding and application is very limited. But in competing systems, the application is more. The students are tested a lot more on application, and then even less on creation. But that's sort of where the real meat lies. That's really where you're making the student come out as a contributor to society and giving them the skill set to adjust in this 21st century sort of skill set based economy that we have going on right now. So for me right now, I think high quality learning in the ambit I'm at, which is student success and high school, I think there needs to be a lot of work done on the tested curriculum specifically. And if I could just sort of give one example, just last year, the MD-CAT, which is an entry test for medical students that now everybody in Pakistan has to take, it was dramatically changed. And there were a lot of more of, sort of testing around cognition, around comprehension and analysis. And that really helped students, they had to acquire a completely new skill set that they hadn't been trained in for the last few years because there was so much emphasis on recall. So that's how I describe the sort of learning, what for me constitutes as learning, and testing is, I think, where the difference really lies at.
That's interesting. So basically, to sum that up, there needs to be more of a focus on like actionability, or like teaching students how to apply what they have learned in the real world. And for that, you need to do more than just recall and memorization. Like you need to teach them how to think about, or even question or think critically about what they're reading or learning. So thank you for that. And Amna, being an educator yourself, you are in a classroom with students on a regular basis. Like, how would you describe high quality learning in an educational setting?
Thank you, Anam. Anam, having engaged with mostly teenagers throughout my teaching career, I have come to the conclusion that there are just like 3 basic things that I need to focus on in my classroom. I think any classroom, nursery to higher education would benefit from these, three principles. If you are teaching, if you're practicing compassion to begin with, if you're practicing compassion, you are enabling your students to be confident and encouraging critical thinking. You are leading them towards high quality education, no matter where they're coming from, no matter what the curriculum is all about, no matter what grade level they are at, no matter what they're following, whatever their background information may be, what their demographics are, it doesn't matter. As long as they are, the classroom environment, the one-to-one relationship between the teacher and the student is enabling critical thinking, compassion, and confidence, the student will end up achieving excellence. And that is really what the goal is of any, in my opinion, that's the goal is of any educational environment, that the student is able to feel confident that they can excel at what they're doing, that they are in charge of their education, they have the agency to decide what they want to do and how they want to do it, and that they have their own goals and they are well on their way to achieving those goals. And that can only happen when they have developed the capacity to think for themselves really what they want and how they want to get to that point from A to Z. They need to build their own pathway. And of course, that becomes a challenge for the teachers, because the teachers really want to get through a curriculum. And the teachers I wouldn't even blame the teachers so much, because there is a certain kind of pressure from the administration, from the government on government school teachers really, that get through the course, get through the book, get them ready for examination, and the teachers really have to get through the book by hook or by crook. So they really don't have the space to engage the students in diverse teaching methodologies. Pedagogy is rarely involved in classroom teaching these days. So if the teachers are able to create the kind of environment that enables the students to think for themselves, be critical in their approach, have the confidence to say that maybe we are wrong, doesn't matter, we can try again, or maybe we can combine two different thought processes and get to the right answer. That's how we actually get to a quality education for me.
It's interesting to hear how there are cases where teachers do want to do more, but I guess because of administration requirements or demands of the job, they don't have the flexibility. And that's actually the first time I'm hearing something like that. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah. Very, very common. Very, very common for us all.
Yeah. And I think that was the purpose of bringing all these different perspectives here as well. We often hear an unfair statement, which is that Pakistani teachers just don't have the qualifications. They're not credible. They just will never be as good as someone with exactly the same qualifications from abroad. And it's unfair. Some of it, sure, may be held in some reason, but you can't generalize like that. So this is a great segue into our next question, actually. Again, going back to the fact that the NewsRun team loves quotes, one of the other quotes that we actually start off our days with and think about our purpose as well is, be the person you needed when you were a kid. And you think back to those moments, you didn't necessarily need a tutor. Sometimes you needed a cheerleader. Sometimes you just needed support, someone to just say, I get it, and you're okay, you'll be great, it doesn't matter. So I think that's a really important one. And our next question, actually, we'd like to start with you again, Amna, because you do come from the educator perspective. The next question is, if we were to drill down to two primary qualifiers that you can prioritize over others, there are many, for educators in Pakistan, what do you think those two would be? And a second part to that is, if you had one soft skill to choose, whether it's empathy, encouragement, resilience, coaching, which one would you say is more prioritized over others?
Okay, so for the first part of your question, like the two things that teachers must have, I honestly feel that teachers need instruction in pedagogy. Our teachers lack pedagogical skills. They are given, they do have technical knowledge. They may acquire that technical knowledge through their own education or through any number of books or online resources that they may have access to, but they rarely have access to true pedagogical skills, which is crucial for classroom practice. So we must encourage some pedagogical learning. In my experience, I recently went through a program myself. I became a student myself to learn how to teach. And while going through the program, I realized how beneficial it was for me, as how it transformed my classroom teaching. And I encouraged a lot of my own colleagues to actually join the program or to find programs that fit their own schedules to learn about pedagogy. And they, the most frequently quoted response from my colleagues who teach in elite schools in Karachi, they simply did not have the time or the inclination to learn how to teach, because they feel very confident that we have the subject knowledge and that alone should be sufficient. So I think that's one of the biggest problems that we have here, that we don't have teachers who are interested in understanding how to teach. Another thing that we must encourage teachers to acquire is understanding the psychology of the age group that you're dealing with. So every teacher is dealing with a different kind of age group. So some of them are teaching, for example, younger kids. Some are teaching middle school. Some are teaching high school. I teach high school, for example. So I need to know what a high schooler thinks like. I need to know how a high schooler feels. And that day, I invested a lot of time and effort in understanding what teenagers want. That was a big research question that I had. What do teenagers want? I mean, how do they define their own health? What are they looking for in the school, right? And I'm sure that middle schoolers need different things and primary schoolers want different things. But how many teachers are really asking that question for themselves? They need to engage in a lot of research in understanding what their students really want. And of course, the demographics will play a big role in that. Urban-rural divide itself will play a big role in that. But teachers need to think about what their students' needs are, and then understand the psychology that goes behind it to be able to connect to the students better. The one thing, the second part of your question, the one thing that any teacher, regardless of their background, regardless of the curriculum they're teaching, the grade level they're teaching, the one thing that they must have is compassion. They need to build their relationship with education on the basis of compassion. Have compassion for the student, have compassion for the system, have compassion for your colleagues, for everyone. Try to understand where everybody is coming from, and make an effort to create the right space that can enable everybody to reach their own potential. Not every child is designed for the same conveyor belt. Every child is not going to go through a boxed process and come out at the end polished and finished. Everybody's going to have their own pace to develop themselves. And you need to have the compassion to realize that you need to give them that space so that they can understand and create the impact that they're there to create.
Thank you so much. That is such an important one, keeping in mind that learning to teach is its own skill. You can't just because you have the knowledge doesn't mean that you're going to be good at teaching. And having that soft skill, understanding that different people come with different strengths and weaknesses and how you can really appeal to them. That's definitely something we think about often too. How do we understand someone's motivation so we can get to them in a much more meaningful way? Anam, we'd actually like to turn this to you next from a technology perspective, since your team is essentially finding this new way to reach students from technology. Do you incorporate compassion and empathy in what you are building from a tech perspective? We'd love to hear your thoughts on those qualifiers and the soft skill as well.
Yeah, it gets way more interesting when it comes to technology, right? Like you have to go above and beyond to create that relationship with the student, which we all talked about was so essential for learning to actually happen. So there are technical qualifiers, which I think most organizations have in place. What we do is that we make sure that the teacher has a master's in the subject area that they're teaching. And then we make sure that they have experience in, again, teaching that grade level and that subject area that they're doing. But one other thing that we really heavily focus on is understanding, like evaluating a teacher's presence. So by teacher's presence, it means there's a lot of pedagogy that, pedagogical understanding that they need to have in terms of how they select and curate content that they're going to be presenting in their videos. And the other thing is that the way we look at it is that we see the app as a platform where rockstar teachers are performing, because it does come down to a performance. So we really have to make sure that the teacher is almost so energetic that the energy is reaching out from the screen onto the student and they're able to captivate and engage the student very meaningfully. So much like celebrities, right? We do feel involved in their lives. We follow, we feel hurt when they feel hurt. So we have to make sure that the teacher's so humanized to the student that they're able to, follow their journey and understand what the content is coming from. So for us, it gets a little bit more technical where we have to build the teacher's presence. We worked with, different universities abroad to create that online teacher training manual for the teachers to really perform at best online. But it is different, a lot. We've seen in COVID times, a lot of people have just gone, from traditional classroom onto online without much training. But there is so much training that goes into an online performance, because it actually comes down to it being a lot of acting involved in teaching with that passion and energy, so that the student stays engaged. And that's what we've seen. We've had amazing engagement metrics. So in just about 6 months, we've had about 200,000 users come on the app and use it, and about 4 million questions being answered in just a small span of time, and about 1.1 million hours of content being watched. So it's really like encouraging and gives us hope, in this. But teachers are the center and the front and the major thing of it.
Thank you. That's awesome. And it's so true. Sometimes when you think about the amount of information you have online, it's overwhelming. So how does someone stand out? And this is probably a good way to turn this to Khubaib, because your generation is truly the generation that has had technology throughout. There's like this joke where someone didn't know what a phone looks like because they're just like trying to press it. But not to pick on you on that for that, Khubaib, but we'd love to learn from your perspective as a student in Pakistan. What do you think are the 2 primary qualifiers that would make you feel more confident studying with a teacher in Pakistan? And what is it that makes you feel motivated from that soft skill perspective?
All right. So primarily, I think, like given my experience, there have been times where there have been teachers who were teaching 5th grade, and just because my teacher left the school, they would pick up teachers from 5th grade just because they had like a master's in that subject. They just send them our way and be like, you can teach these kids now. So I feel like those teachers, they can't possibly understand how the mind of a 10th grader works compared to the mind of a 5th grader, right? Because they're 2 completely separate age groups. So I feel like a teacher, apart from their own education, like sure, that matters, they need to have the relevant ability to teach. And I think that's what we refer to as pedagogical methods, right? So I feel like if a teacher knows how to teach, it doesn't matter that if they're that educator or not, right? So basically a teacher's role is to actually, come across to the student properly and really convey that message properly. So if I were to be given a piece of paper and I lacked the proper training to actually convey that message, I wouldn't be able to talk to you guys about it properly, right? You wouldn't understand what I'm talking about. So I feel like a primary qualifier would definitely be how a teacher is trained and how they're suited to the age group that they're actually teaching. And other than that, I feel like professional experience really matters in that sense, because I guess professional experience goes hand in hand with the age group, right? So a teacher who's teaching A-levels should be teaching A-levels. She shouldn't be with a 5th grader, for example. So I feel like that's something that in Pakistan, at least, that's something you can actually expect from a teacher anywhere, really. So, I mean, that's that. But other than that, if we're talking about soft skills, I feel like from a teacher myself, I would expect them to be compassionate. I would expect them not to be just a teacher, but actually to be a mentor, right? You see great movies. You see movies like Karate Kid. I'm pretty sure everyone from my generation or your generation has seen that. So I feel like if the teacher is a good mentor, if the teacher is someone that the students really understand and they can connect with, then I feel like if there's that relationship there, then the student is more inspired, he's more motivated, or she's more motivated to work. No one likes a teacher that the student resents. Like, you wouldn't pay attention in class, like at least I wouldn't pay attention in class to a person that I don't particularly enjoy listening to. So yeah, so the teacher should be a positive role model, and they should be someone who the student can really connect with in order for them to actually be effective at their job.
That's awesome. Completely agree. And if anyone hasn't watched Karate Kid, you will feel like, yes, I want that mentor too. So definitely do that. But Ms. Seema, we'd love to end this question with you, because we do have some challenges in a different system when you're coming from more underprivileged areas where you're hiring teachers to teach these kids, and you're so passionate about giving them this high quality education, and the curriculum should be competing at a global level. I guess there's different challenges when you're hiring teachers and you don't have as much flexibility and giving them a master's degree and whatnot. So for Care Foundation, what are the two primary qualifiers for a quality teacher? And then what is that one skill that you choose? If you could tell all of your teachers today, this is the one skill I need you to master as a soft skill, that's what you need to do, what would it be?
Well, first, I believe that teaching is not a job. It's not like I won't be whatever, I'll become a teacher because I have this degree. It's not a job, it's a calling. It's a very special empathy and a very special place. It's much bigger than a job. I'm a teacher. I'm a teacher because I care. I care for others, maybe more than for myself. I empathize with others. You have to, that's what a teacher's job is. Be it a primary grade teacher or a higher level, that's two other things. And by the way, many, many masters floating around in Pakistan, by the way. It's another, lots and lots, in fact, double masters, and even in our schools. But we never allow a master's or a double master's to teach our primary sections at all. Much better to have people with less qualification. And so honestly, the most important is, for me, a teacher is not, it's just not a job. I tell all our teachers, it's the mission vision of the organization too. Our core belief is that the welfare of the child is supreme. Only that person stay in our school who thinks that the child is the most. We're totally student-centered, totally student-centered. And the self-respect of the communities we serve is of supreme importance. And that's our core values, which are told to every teacher. That makes all the difference in itself, you know. Nobody can get angry or hit a child or ever say in our school, keep quiet, you don't know anything. I really mind that. If I ever hear anyone say, quiet, you don't know anything, that's it, you're out, you can't be a teacher, because children have to air their opinions. And so the challenges are pretty much the same. It has to be the right person. The degree does not make anyone the right person to teach others. It's pretty much like doctors and nurses. You know, everyone can't be a doctor or a nurse, even though you're highly qualified. You know, some people, there's some doctors who are everyone's favorite. What? It's the way they talk to you. It's the way they explain to you. It's their human interaction. And so the same goes for nurses, the same goes for teachers. It's their human interaction. Only those people should become teachers who are role models, who want to be teachers, who have a real caring for people. Be it, I'm sure, I think the online teaching and the EdTech type of thing, I don't know what skills are needed there, but I just know about real life schools and primary and secondary, whatever, classes up to 10. I think pretty much qualification is important, but really not. They better know their work, but they better know how to pass on their work. And for that, a lot of patience, kindness, putting students first. The thing which is worst especially in state schools and I'm sure others, is where it's the rote learning. There is just a method. There are questions, and then they want to give you the answers. They don't want to, some schools, I feel they hit the children on the head and say, don't think, this is the answer. So it's, it's what the mission vision is. And, some people are right to be teachers, and it's those who want to listen to the children, who are young at heart, maybe. Those must be teachers who are young at heart always. They're ready to listen to the children, to appreciate all the things they say. And there's so much learning, you can learn so much if you allow little children to speak, their thoughts on whatever is happening in class or whatever you're reading. I find it fascinating. And I feel that teachers should be people who are ready to listen, who are young at heart, who have empathy and understand that the children are more important than them. So that
Thank you
is
so
what I
much.
think.
That's amazing. And we are so pleased to hear this. I hope everyone who's finding a way to get involved as a teacher, is anything in education, can take some of this with them. Just a quick housekeeping for all of our audience who is sending in questions. We have one more question that we would like to ask the panelists. Then we will take some audience questions, and then we'll go back to our last question of the event. But thank you all for hanging around. We're getting lots of questions in and comments, so this is amazing. But Anam, I'll pass it on to you for the next one.
Okay, thank you, Mumil. So while talking about educational equality and how to provide a quality education, we felt like it was timely and fitting to ask this question about the new single national curriculum that's been introduced in Pakistan by the government. And we've also covered this in the NewsRun at length, but I do want to give some context to our audience members in case they haven't had an opportunity to do more research on this subject. So Pakistan's government has introduced a single national curriculum, and it says it has done this to improve educational standards and ensure equal educational opportunities in the country. And so the single national curriculum, based on what the news has been saying, means that all private schools, public schools, and religious seminaries have to teach single national curriculum-based books. And the government claims that this is supposed to lay the foundation for a uniform system of education in Pakistan. So we have a lot of stakeholders and perspectives here today that are related to education in some capacity. So we would really like to ask and Anam, we'd start with you for this question. From your perspective, what are the advantages or disadvantages of a single national curriculum in Pakistan, and in terms of improving educational standards and ensuring an equal education?
I think that it makes sense for learning outcomes to be aggregated and for at least a basic threshold to be set. Because we all talked about how learning is an equalizer, and that's how education should be treated. It does help in delivering social justice and inequality. So in that regard, having a set standard of outcomes that every student at a certain grade level should be at least meeting, and then above and beyond is up to the school. So I think in that regard, it makes sense. And we talked about how there's sort of parallel systems in education in Pakistan. There's a madrasa system where the emphasis on, learning when it comes to the sciences or English or languages is lower compared to religious learning. So the single national curriculum in that regard helps bridge that gap, that students of grade 1 to 5 right now are at least learning those concepts in math and those concepts in other disciplines. So as far as learning objectives being aligned is concerned, I think that's a good effort. Now there's again the written part of the document, right? Which is, what books are you publishing? How are you executing on that front? That's a really important piece of this for it to work effectively. So on that regard, I think the execution is a very important deliverable. And then the third part of it, which is the testing of it, right? I think that's where more work needs to be done. I would want to see more reform of how the testing is actually done. So I think that's going to be the real equalizer, because if you're encouraging your students to think more cognitively, if you're encouraging them to think more along the lines of analysis and not just on rote, then they're able to contribute better. They'll be able to, the gainful employment opportunities would be a lot more for them, as opposed to students who are in a parallel system where the focus is more on analyzing and then, eventually creating. So I think those two pieces, where it comes to the written part, what the textbooks, how the textbooks being distributed, is there access to them? Can we have diverse set of textbooks being introduced without a delay? Those things are like really important. But as far as the ideological, having the learning outcomes being aligned for schools to follow and then above and beyond, I think that ideologically makes sense.
Yeah, and you made a good point about needing to learn more about what the quality of the content in these textbooks and what's actually in them, because I agree that this information is not very widely available right now. Maybe it is to people who are currently in schools and teaching grades 1 to 5, but I guess from our perspective, as the members of the public, we still need more information in that respect. And Ms. Seema, you meant one of CARE's like missions is to provide an equal education to all. So it would be interesting to hear your perspective on the single national curriculum.
Yes, thank you. So it's too new for now. It's just barely been rolled out. And like I'm saying, some other companies are also trying to, some other organizations also being allowed to print the books on the same learning outcomes or whatever. And those books aren't out yet. But I don't know, our belief absolutely is that all equal and there should be an even playing field. But two thoughts on it. One, that it has to be, you have to take everyone to the highest common denominator, not to the lowest common denominator. So we can't bring anyone down. It has to go up to the highest common denominator. That, I don't know whether that, but it's too new again. The other thought is that no country is an island unto itself, nor are we an island. It's a very interconnected world. We have to keep up with what's happening in the rest of the world, and our children, wherever, if we are equal and everyone's studying the same, we better be equal to some of the most advanced countries in the world, or we better be getting there. That's how it is. It's just an interconnected world. No one can make a curriculum for themselves as a country and fight their own, worry about their own internal disputes. But we have to stay connected to the world. And I am not sure, I don't know because it's too new, how connected is it going to be with technology and how cutting edge is it and how much are we going to take our children forward? So being on the same level has for me to mean being at the best level, at the highest common denominator. And I don't know, can't say, too early, but those are my thoughts on it. Yeah.
That is true. It is too early. And so and it's also, it looks like there are different approaches to how an equal education should be provided. And Khubaib, as a student, what are your thoughts on the single national curriculum?
Well, single national curriculum, as far as I've heard, it's going to take some time for it to come out. I think it's set to complete by 2023, all the books and all the stuff that comes along with it. So it's really too early to speak. But if we're talking about the main goal that they are trying to achieve is that everyone has an equal education. And I feel like equal education won't come just by rolling out books. Just because everyone's studying the same thing doesn't mean they're being taught the same way. So again, it's more about who's teaching whatever is attempted to being taught, right? So I feel like rather than enforcing an SNC, we should have like a system where all teachers are being trained the same way, or at least they're being certified to teach. So I feel like that would be a much better approach than an SNC, because if we talk about the different school systems, you have private schools, you have public schools, you have madrasas, they all have different types of teachers. And I feel like we all can agree that private schools, it's more likely that a private school has better teachers. They have teachers that are more qualified perhaps, or they're better equipped to teach. So I feel like if we take that into account, an SNC wouldn't really improve the education of the society as a whole. And other than that, if you think about the books, right? If we've heard that the SNC is going to have the same books and everyone's going to be studying from the same books, there's also another complication that comes with that, is that Pakistan being a very political nation and everything's kind of clogged up over here. So it kind of goes like this, that the private schools have like this association where they have their own books, right? They'll be like, okay, we're not interested in teaching that, and there's going to be a lot of resentment. They're going to oppose that, obviously, and maybe they'll agree to teach the SNC to some degree, but they're going to have their own courses because that's just how they are. That's how they always have been. So for the government to really implement it, they have to really enforce it properly. They have to actually bring the private schools, especially the private schools, on the same level as the other ones, right? So basically your madrasas and your public schools, they need to level up, like Seema over here mentioned, that they really need to be operating on the same level. So in order to do that, I feel like the SNC could have some major changes made to it rather than, handing everyone the same book, because we know how that has played out like in the past as well.
Yeah, and even while reading about this in the news, we have noticed that there are some private schools that are hesitating to adopt the single national curriculum textbooks. And the news is changing so much in that respect, so I don't think I can really just explain like which schools have agreed to adopt it, which haven't. I feel like we would need to do more research on that. But Ms. Amna, as an educator, how do you feel about this introduction of the single national curriculum?
All right, on principle, I would say that we need a single national curriculum. In Pakistan, we have more than 100 education boards. And for a country our size, with so many children out of 22 million children out, almost 23 million children out of school, to have over 100 education boards who are all doing whatever they wish. I mean, everybody's planning their own curriculum, their own testing methodology, their own strategies, their own qualifications for teachers, and so on. So having so many different boards is creating more diversity, yes, but also more discord amongst the nation. So from that point of view, I do believe that having a single national curriculum might actually, in one way, be a driver towards nation building, and it can play a positive role. However, the greatest challenge that I see over here is that the designers and the builders of the curriculum are victims of groupthink. They tend to focus their energies on setting up a curriculum that they feel needs to be delivered, but may not reflect the true sentimentalities, the true politics. I mean, I couldn't agree with Kobe more that our systems are so wrought with politics. If you have to consider the sentiments of the people while you're actually designing the curriculum, does everything that goes into the textbook or into the teaching and testing curriculum, does it actually fit well with what the nation is actually already believing about their own lifestyles, about their own nationality, about their own belief systems, and so on and so forth. So how will you actually go about designing a curriculum that engages and conforms to the mindsets of so many different populations? And honestly speaking, Anam, Sadiq, and Khubaib and I, we come from very urban backgrounds. Miss Seema is the only one amongst us really who has gone from town to town, visiting rural schools and areas where education really needs to be taken to the people. And she's really in a great position to help us understand how the rural population really thinks about education. Because after all, yes, we are a big chunk of the population, but after all, most of our population is rural. And their thought processes and their needs for education are very different from our thought processes. Awareness in itself is, going to create a big divide. So a lot of things that a student, even a student as young as somebody going from to second or third grade, would know a lot more in an urban setting than somebody who's coming from a rural background, for example, or somebody who's from a working class community would have very different ideas of how they need to be educated compared to somebody who's coming from a business class community. So keeping all of these things in consideration, designing a national curriculum in terms of content is going to be a big, big, big challenge. And that remains to be seen how it can be executed really. But principally, yes, our nation needs to come together on at least a single standpoint on who we are and what we need to achieve. Collective goals need to be highlighted and then aspired to.
Yeah, so based on all these answers, my key takeaway is that one, the SNC's goal to ensure equal educational opportunities is a nice thought to have. I don't think many people are disputing that. I guess execution is something that is still a question mark, and that does remain to be seen. So, Mumal, do you want to take it from here?
Yes. Firstly, big thank you to all the panelists. We have one more question we want to end on, which is forward thinking, solution based. We've all discussed the challenges we're dealing with. No surprise, no secret. Before that, in the interest of time, We will take 2 audience questions, and we'll start with Baba Rahim's question on how can the Pakistani diaspora get engaged? So anyone who's living outside of Pakistan. Are there opportunities for the diaspora to engage with students or sponsor them? How does one get involved in being part of the solution? So I'm going to expand on this question a little bit more outside of just CARE Foundation and being involved with the NGO, which we will address in just a moment. There's a few other ways as well, whether it's from an education technology perspective, helping empower educators, giving students mentorship and opportunity. So maybe we start this answer with Khubaib. How do you think people, Pakistanis living abroad, can help Pakistani students at home?
I feel like if we talk about private school students specifically, people abroad, I feel like they probably understand the education system there better. Like if in terms of if someone from a private school plans to go abroad, I feel like they could help counsel the student. Not that there aren't college counselors over here. There's private setups, but they charge a lot of money, and it's really hard to really research where you want to go abroad. So I feel like from that perspective they could help there. Other than that, I feel like the government could really they could really talk to like these overseas people and really understand the education system there and maybe the values of people there, so that Pakistan, the students in Pakistan are more up to date and they're more prepared to actually challenge or compete at a global level.
Awesome. Anam, would you like to comment on this from an education technology and startup perspective?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting time to be in technology right now in Pakistan. You're seeing a lot of investment coming into technology. You're seeing technology solutions really being scaled up, and that's our vision with EdCasa. We're trying to get to 1 million, inshallah, by next year. So in that regard, I think that people who are sitting outside, they have access to skilled workforce. They have access to different people working in technology. So I think those kind of connections and licensing really helps accelerate a startup's journey. So just the transfer of knowledge, I think that's a really key piece that people sitting abroad can facilitate with.
That's absolutely true. Turn around, help someone else up. We're all going to rise together. Amna, as an educator and teacher, how do you feel the diaspora can help empower our teachers at home?
I would actually second Anam Sadiq that a transfer of knowledge is actually one of the greatest contributions that a diaspora can make. They have access to so many different kinds of teaching and learning resources and teaching and learning opportunities that they can shift our way, cascade their learning, whatever they have learned, however they have been practicing their methodologies, they could just transfer that skill to us, and that would be absolutely fantastic. In fact, some of the programs that I was trying to bring to Pakistan for our teachers turned out to be too expensive for Pakistani teachers to actually enroll in. So if our diaspora actually can feel like they have acquired those skills and now they can cascade that learning at a rate that our teachers are able to acquire it, that would be fantastic. Also, I answered that question for Barbara, I think. Baba's question, right?
Yes.
That one of the greatest things that our diaspora really can do and should do is to send money our way, like send us the money, because there are so many organizations like CARE Foundation, like so many other NGOs that have on-ground presence and they can deliver quality education to the people right here, but they simply cannot do so because they don't have the resources, they don't have the money to do it, they don't have to keep the ball rolling. So diaspora, besides transfer of knowledge, the most important thing is, I think, keeping the funds going. There are so many fundraising activities everywhere around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. You need the money to make things happen. That's just the reality, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs for the teachers too. Ms. Seema, we'd like to end this question with you. How do you think the diaspora can get involved to be part of the solution?
Everyone was saying, obviously, from their perspective, I'm thinking of the 22 million children out of school. And if we can't get those in school and get them a good education, and also a very large number who are in schools where they come out of 10 years of education without any education at all. So thinking of the 22 million out of school and the many millions who are in school but are not getting an education. I'm thinking of how we can do that, how we can improve that. And that can, well, like Amna said, in many ways it's about funds, but it's also come and get involved. I mean, we need to adopt more government schools. We need to build more schools. Just ensure that all our children get into school and get the quality of education that is their right, that is without which the country can never move forward. How can a country with 50% literacy, as you're saying, and that literacy too, which is doubtful, how can a country move forward unless all its people are empowered, and together we can move forward? But with so many children out of school, so many people in today's day, think of an illiterate person. Tell me a job for an illiterate. Tell me what job can an illiterate person do? Tell me, show me what life is going to be like in today and tomorrow for the 22 million plus children who will not go to school. So I don't know, that's my primary interest, is that every child should somehow get into school. And honestly, together we can all do it. It's only together we can all do it. We have to think of that. If if 2 or 3 or 4% of our children are get really good schooling, it's not going to change the destiny of the country. It's not going to change that. So we do need to think of those who are not there. And I don't know, I can only again state the Care Foundation's journey and our experience. Everyone wants to educate their children. Our children are very bright. The good news is they are amazing. The results that we have out of our most rural schools, I was telling them we have a rural school way 1 hour out of Lahore, 7-10 miles off any main road, 1,100 girls today. We've taken it up to BA. Girls walk hours and miles to that school and to all the schools we know of. So remember that the good news is there's a population really keen to get an education. There are parents really keen to educate their children. We just somehow need to get more involved, build more schools, or which is I feel the best way forward is to somehow adopt more and more government schools so that the money goes directly into education. You don't put money into bricks and mortar. You use already, that's our philosophy, use already existing buildings and just ensure that more and more of our children get an education and a good quality of education. And I think that's the only way that we can ever move forward. And I think that that's where the diaspora and people all over the world can help. Maybe with time come in and with technology solutions, but yes, with support in whichever way they want. But we need to move those children into school and get them a good education.
Thank you so much, Ms. Seema. Thank you to all of the panelists for this incredibly insightful discussion. I think what we have covered is empathy. We've acknowledged our own privilege. We all come from much more privileged backgrounds. We don't all have experience being with public schools, but we have a desire to. It's not a race to the bottom. We can't just say, well, this doesn't apply. It should apply. That's why we're trying to bring everyone up together. And it's uncomfortable, but we do have to address all of the things that we are faced with, all of the challenges that we're faced with. So I know we are so over time. We are going to wrap this up with a quick round. Everyone has 30 seconds to answer. But if there's one thing our audience can take away from this session, what is the one thing you hope they walk away with? We'll start with Khubeb. I think Khubeb might be frozen. So maybe Anam, we'll start with you.
I'm so conflicted on what that one thing should be. So I'm going to talk about what I think other people probably want. Is I think that there needs to be improvement on the testing curriculum. There needs to be more thought on what the student performance is being held accountable for. What's that standard?
Great. We need to have a better, more standardized curriculum. Amna, would you like to go next?
Pedagogy needs to be focused much more. Teachers need to be trained in teaching. And Ms. Seema actually mentioned it, that not anybody who just walks up to the school can be a teacher or should be a teacher at all. This is a heartfelt profession. This is a job that needs to be taken seriously. So anybody who wants to work in education must have excellent pedagogical knowledge and skills.
Great, thank you. So standardized teaching, better training, and everyone should know how to teach. Khubeb, if there's one thing you want the audience to take away from this session, what would that one thing be?
Feel like if our audience is abroad, they should definitely find a way to help us out, maybe sponsor a child's education, maybe fund some sort of digital teaching. I feel like my Sanam can help out there. So that's something the audience, I feel like the whole goal of the panel was to actually help understand how to improve the education of students in Pakistan and actually find a way to get those students who aren't receiving an education into schools and maybe make schools for them. So I feel like if people can actually understand how that works, they'll be more inclined to help. I feel like we've been talking about building empathy in teachers and students. I feel like there needs to be empathy in like the public to actually help out these teachers and these schools and the government itself to actually, function as a whole, because after all, the government works off of the taxpayers' money, right? So I feel like if the audience understands that, if they understand the need for schools, if they understand the need to, teach people and understand the importance of education, really, we can definitely hope for a better future.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Khubeb. Ms. Seema, 30 seconds. What do you want the audience to know?
Oh, I believe that it's the duty of government to ensure that all our children get an education, and education is critical. Let me tell you, there's no life without education. It's the biggest disability that anyone can have. On the list of disabilities, this is the top disability, is illiteracy. You are actually, you're not unemployed, you're unemployable. So it may be the duty of government, but honestly and sincerely, the duty of all of us to ensure that our children somehow get an education. So I'm going to say it's not, the only crime is inactivity. Do whatever you can. You've heard so much. Everyone should do whatever they can, but inaction would be a crime. When a crisis is so big, as we have heard, 22 million children out of school, only 58% literacy, and the quality of that education is not good. And to move into the developed world, you need everyone to be educated and the quality of education to be really good. So honestly, we float together or sink together. So if we understand that, then the duty of all of us to do whatever we can at whichever capacity we can, to send money, to give time, to give advice, to, whatever, but do something. There's no more time to waste. We need to do something. Inaction is the only crime at this time.
That is absolutely true. Thank you so much for everyone's expertise and taking the time to be part of this important discussion. If there's anything we know now, this group is not inactive. It is a very active group in making sure we're part of the solution. Everyone who attended this session, thank you for making the time to share your comments, your questions still coming in privately to panelists as well. Like, this is fantastic. Take away from this that everyone has the ability to make a change. And hopefully that is what we will all do after we get off this Zoom. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. You will find this recording on the NewsRun YouTube channel. It'll probably be up tomorrow. We will also have links up on our Instagram. Do make sure you check us out on the newsrun.com. It is a daily email newsletter that provides smart breakdowns of Pakistan's top news. We have also included a link to learn more about CARE Foundation. And anyone who's based in the US can learn more about Pakistan Literacy Care, Pakistan Literacy Fund, which is the US arm of CARE Foundation. Panelists, thank you so much for your time. Audience, thank you so much for attending. We hope everyone has a good day, night, wherever everyone is, and we'll be keeping in touch. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.